Hello everyone, welcome to yet another session of the daily news analysis by SRIRAM'S IAS, where we take up the important articles featuring in the Hindu newspaper and break them down for our understanding from the UPSC examination point of view. So let's start our today's discussion by taking the important articles which feature in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. And let's take up our first article for the day. The first article reads, Supreme Court in a majority verdict upholds the EWS quota. Now, this article appears in the front page of the newspaper, obviously because it's a landmark judgment being given by the Supreme Court where it discussed the EWS quota verdict and upheld the reservation, which was essentially giving 10% reservations to castes other than the SC, ST and OBC. So via this article and this issue, we'll understand what exactly happened in the Supreme Court, how exactly the Supreme Court decided on this question, what were the reasonings and the judgment that was given, and this judgment was given in the favor of EWS quota via a proportionality of 3:2, which means that from the 5 judges that were sitting on this case, 3 judges upheld the EWS reservation and 2 judges did not upheld and were known as the dissenting judges. So the judgment given by the judges who upheld the EWS quota is known as the majority judgment, and judges who do not agree with it and give a dissenting opinion are known as the dissenting judges, or their judgment is known as the dissenting judgment. So we'll analyze both their views, and through this we'll understand this maze issue of the EWS quota. So first let's understand what exactly is this EWS quota, or the 103rd amendment through which it was brought out in the Constitution. So we all know that the Constitution of India has certain provisions which enables it to make affirmative actions, which means that such kind of actions which make the positions of certain people better, and these kind of affirmation actions are done in the form of reservation, and this is enshrined in the Article 115 and 16 of the Indian Constitution, wherein reservations for specific categories of castes such as the scheduled tribes, scheduled castes and the OBCs for reservations in public employment and public education is enshrined in these Article 15 and 16. So in the same article, on January 2019, the Union government through the Parliament, first it moved a bill into the Parliament. First it was passed in the Lok Sabha and then in the Rajya Sabha, and in January 2019 it brought out an amendment for the Constitution to amend Article 15 and 16 and to add an additional clause where if earlier reservations was granted on the basis of the caste category, now reservation would be granted on the economical category as well. So on the basis of how much income an household is earning, on that basis also a reservation could be granted. And this new category was added via the 103rd amendment in the Constitution, which was known as the economically weaker section category. So via this amendment, amendments were made in the articles 15 subclause 6 and 16 subclause 6. This were added in the Constitution to provide up to 10% reservation to the economically weaker section among non-OBC and non-SC/ST sections of the population. So this is a keyword which we need to remember, that this reservation was added over and above the SC/ST and OBC reservation, which meant that people from this category who were availing the reservation earlier through the SC/ST and OBC reservation, this new category was not meant for them, and this was meant for the forward castes, or so-called people who are excluded from these category, and those people who are poor, which means that they are coming in the economically weaker section. So it is this category of people for which this reservation was brought. So in other words, the amendment had changed the Constitution and introduced a quota for the poor among the so-called forward castes or general category. So this is an important point to understand, that up until now the Constitution allowed for horizontal reservation. So when we say that there is a reservation based on caste, it's an example of horizontal reservation. But by making reservation for the poor and for the forward castes as well, this has been an instance of vertical reservation in the Constitution. So this was touted as a new move, and therefore some section of the people started celebrating this move, and some sections started opposing this move, saying that this is actually not according to the Constitution. It is unconstitutional in nature, because as I said, only horizontal nature of reservation was enshrined in the Constitution and not this vertical one, meaning that on the basis of economic criteria, the reservation was not said to be granted in the constitution. This is what the opposers of this amendment started to say. And hence, a case was lodged in the Supreme Court, which was supposed to take a call on this issue, and this particular 103rd amendment was actually challenged in the Supreme Court on the grounds that this particular amendment violates the basic structure of the constitution. So we'll come to that, but let's understand, when we talk about the EWS category, who are those people? When we mean that they are economic weaker section, who are those people who can avail this reservation? So this EWS criteria for employment and admission was notified by the Department of Personnel and Training. So this DOPT department gave out a notification to further substantiate who were those people who would come under the EWS category, and they notified that such people or a person who was not covered under any scheme of reservation for SCs, STs and OBCs, this is something which we saw earlier right now, and whose family had a gross annual income below rupees 8 lakh was to be identified as EWS for the benefit of reservation. So we get two categories. One is that that person should not be coming under a previous scheme of reservation, and second, his income should be less than 8 lakh per annum. This notification specified what constituted income and excluded some persons from the EWS category if their families possessed certain specified assets. What this means is that the notification gave out an income slab, and with that income slab as well, there were certain other provisions which said that if a person is owning a certain set of lands, if he's owning residential properties, so this means that he's owning certain specified assets, and if that person is owning those assets, he might again not get the benefit of the EWS reservation. So this was the criteria that was laid down by the government, which was earlier questioned by the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court had earlier asked the central government whether it thinks that the 8 lakh per annum criteria is a valid criteria. Because if you look at this 8 lakh figure, most of the people of the country can come under this 8 lakh per annum income slab, and that is why the whole point of granting 10% EWS reservation might not achieve its motive. But the central government had formed a panel in the month of January 2022, and it accepted the recommendations of the panel, where the panel said that having the 8 lakh per annum income slab is a valid income slab to have. So this was the background information with respect to the EWS. Now what happened in the court and why did the matter go to the court? So as I said, the opposers of this amendment said that this is actually an attack on the basic structure of the constitution, because it changes the constitution. As we saw, this is amending the constitution, so it changes the constitution in a manner which the constitution did not allow the amenders to do so. So let's understand why and how the court decided this matter. So whenever the court has to decide on if any law is violating the basic structure of the constitution, there are two tests which were laid down in the M. Nagaraj case, which in 2006. One is the width test that examines the boundaries of amending power. So whether or not how much amending power was given, is it in the same boundaries that the amendment has been done? So that is why first one is the width test, and second one is the identity test, under which the Supreme Court examines whether the latest amendment alters the identity of the constitution. Now this is something which is very important. This is the beauty of the basic structure doctrine, that it allows the parliament to amend any part of the constitution, but what it does not allow is to change the soul of the constitution, and that soul has been termed as the basic structure. So there are certain ideals of the constitution, certain fundamental things that are encompassing the basic structure, and the parliament cannot change that. So to identify it, there's an identity test which is given, which means that no amendment can change the personality of the constitution, and to satisfy the test, one has the heavy burden to prove that the constitution after the amendment is virtually unrecognizable. So the amendment that has been done to the constitution should be of such a nature that after that amendment, the constitution is unrecognizable in its previous form. That's how it would be said that the identity of the whole constitution has been changed. So these were the two tests which were earlier laid down, and these were relied by the Supreme Court to again check the basic structure, whether the EWS law is valid under basic structure or not. So essentially the Supreme Court had 4 questions to answer it in front of itself. What were these 4 questions? First was that can there be quotas based on economic criteria alone? So whether or not the EWS law breaks the doctrine of basic structure dependent on 4 questions, and first one, as we saw, whether such kind of reservation should be done on economic criteria alone, because as we saw earlier, this is a new form of vertical reservation. Second question is exclusion of SC, ST, SEBC from quota discriminatory. This was also one controversial point we saw, wherein those people who are going to get the benefit who are outside of these categories. So is excluding these people from the new reservation category a discriminatory practice? So is it violating Article 14 of the Constitution? The third question is, can quota for poor breach the 50% ceiling for reservation? This 50% ceiling for reservation has its genesis in the Indira Sahni judgment. We'll take a detailed look at the judgment in coming slides, but this was another question that was in the form of in front of the Supreme Court. And the fourth question is, can private colleges be forced to have EWS quota? Which means that if the Article 15 and 16 account for reservation in public employment and public education, but EWS category quota were also made for private unaided colleges, those kind of institutions which the government had no role to play in terms of its funding. So the court also had to decide whether EWS reservation is valid in these private colleges as well. So the judges of the Supreme Court in a 3-2 verdict gave their answers essentially on these 4 areas. So what did they have to say on these things? And essentially the answers to these questions decided whether the EWS is constitutional or unconstitutional. So let's take up the first question, where can there be quotas based on economic criteria alone? This was the pivotal question with respect to this case, and in the majority judgment, the judges concurred that yes, there can be quotas based on economic criteria alone, and the reason for keeping economic criteria distinct from the earlier horizontal version of the reservation was that poverty is an adequate marker of deprivation that the state can address through reservations. So they recognized poverty as an adequate marker, and EWS therefore deemed as a separate and distinct category. So the main reasoning that they did was they did not interfere with the previous scheme, and they recognized that by instituting a new category can be called as a separate and distinct one. That is why introducing EWS is not an unconstitutional move, and reservation can be given on the economic criteria as well. Justice Bela Trivedi also concurred with this and said that essentially what the Constitution should have, what should be the ground for reservation, is the understanding of the legislature, and the legislature understands and appreciates the needs of its own people is what the judiciary is assuming, and that is why the legislature is free to amend the Constitution howsoever it wants. Even Justice Pardiwala said that while he is conscious of the fact that the economically weaker sections of the citizens are not declared as socially and economically backward classes, for the purpose of Article 15(4) of the Constitution, separate reservations are not barred by the Constitution, and he cited right to education as an example. So as we can see the reasoning of the majority judges in this particular question, that they did not feel that introducing a new category of economically weaker section actually sabotaged the previous category, and this particular category is a distinct one. And even he said that there are certain examples like the Right to Education Act. What does Right to Education Act say under the article, which is recognized as a part of Article 21? It says that granting compulsory education to kids is very important. So this is also a form of reservation. This is what the judge said, that there are certain other categories as well, and therefore introducing a new category is not a unconstitutional move. But the minority opinion in this one differed, where Justice Ravindra Bhatt said, while laws that provide benefits based on only on economic criteria do not by themselves violate the right to equality, but the Constitution envisages reservations to only community-based and not individual-centric. So even the minority judges accepted that having a criteria based on poverty is not a wrong criteria and it can be allowed, but it does not go with the scheme of the Constitution, which only provided for community-based reservation and not individual-centric. This was the view of both the majority and minority set of judges in the first question. Now let's come to the second question, where is excluding the SC, ST, SEBC from the quota a discriminatory move? This was a very large question to have, and the majority opinion in this was no, that excluding them does not amount to discriminatory activities because Justice Dinesh Maheshwari said that there cannot be competition of claims for affirmative action based on disadvantages. Reservation cannot be denied to one section, that is the EWS, because that segment is otherwise not suffering from other disadvantages. What he meant by this was that if a certain set of people or a community of people, SC, ST or otherwise, if they were suffering from some kind of disadvantages, they are suffering from caste backwardness, that does not make only them the receiver of reservation, and certain other set of individuals also who are facing some other kind of disadvantages can also get reservation, is what the judges felt, and that is why they did not feel that introducing a second category and not including these categories was a discriminatory move. Even Justice Pardiwala said that Article 16(4) is exhaustive for reservation in favor of backward classes, but the section is not exhaustive for the concept of reservation. So all the understanding that we are getting from the judge's opinion over here is that they did not mind introducing a parallel category other than the reservation for castes based on caste categories. And the new constitutional amendment introducing another affirmative action method is real as separate and distinct. This is what we are understanding from their opinion. What did the minority judges had to say on this? The minority opinion was this was the deciding opinion. This was the crucial main ground for striking down the constitutional amendment as per the minority opinion. So the answer to this question actually became the breaking ground for the minority judges to hold that this particular amendment is actually unconstitutional. So how did they interpret this? They felt that excluding the SC, ST and OBC from the EWS category is actually a very wrong and a move which alters the Article 14 soul of the Constitution, and therefore the EWS is unconstitutional. What kind of reason did they give? First is that it others those subjected to socially questionable and outlawed practices, though they are amongst the poorest sections of society, and goes against the idea of fraternity. They felt that by introducing a parallel category for reservation and excluding the SC, ST and OBC from this actually makes a phenomenon of otherism. And if we look closer, there are most number of people who are poor and they belong to the backward caste category. And the judge cited a Sino Commission report in this regard, which found out that 38% of the total SC population and 48% of the total ST population actually lives below poverty line. So what does this say? That even in people from SC and ST category, there are people who are poor, and it is these people who won't be able to get the benefit of the EWS quota. This is where the judges felt that this kind of discrimination is not valid, and that is why this amendment does not stand. Second reason which they gave is such exclusion virtually confines SC, OBC within their allocated reservation quotas. Right? This is what we're saying, that if they are not allowed to avail any other quota, it is only the quota that is given to them. 15% for SCs, 7.5% for STs and 27% for OBCs is what they'll get, and it denies them the chance of mobility. This is a very crucial thing, where even if they want to move away from their caste reservation and move their income up and get the chance to avail EWS reservation, they won't be able to do so, and it denies them a chance of mobility. These were the reasons which the judges gave in order to strike down the EWS as unconstitutional, but it was the minority opinion, and therefore that was not to be prevailed. Now we come to the third question, which was, is this quota for poor breaching the 50% ceiling for reservation? Now this question has its genesis in the case of landmark judgment of 1992, that is the Indira Sahni versus Union of India. This case had a lot to decide on the reservation issue, and it gave a verdict where it accepted the caste categories for various communities, SC, ST and OBC, and gave a ceiling that more than 50% should not, the reservation limit should not be more than 50%. This is what the judgment came out in 1992, and it held that reservation cannot cross 50%. And in the current case, so does it mean that this current case has overruled the Indira Sahni judgment? No. This is a 5-judge bench, and the Indira Sahni was a 9-judge bench. So the 5-judge court could not have overruled Indira Sahni, which was a larger bench, but found reasoning to uphold the EWS quota. So what the judges have essentially done in this case is that they have found a way to actually approve EWS without overruling the Indira Sahni judgment. So this is an important point which we should remember. So what did the majority have to say in this? That no, the EWS quota does not violate the 50% ceiling, because 50% ceiling was for backward classes and it overstretched to the reservation provided for entirely different class. So again, as per the reasoning, they are interpreting EWS as a distinct category, and they said that the 50% reservation is for this backward class reservation for ST, SC, OBC. But if there is a new category that is introduced, it does not fall under this particular 50% ceiling judgment. That is how they interpreted the 50% mark. Then what did the minority judges have a view on this? Even Justice Bhatt refrained from expressing a view on whether it is permissible to breach the 50% ceiling, and the minority opinion warned that breaching it could eat up the rule of equality. This is again their opinion, and they did not have anything strong to say on this. Now we come to the last question on this, where why are private colleges forced to have EWS quota? So even in this question, the majority judges held that these unaided private institutions, including those imparting professional education, cannot be seen as standing out of the national mainstream. So this is a landmark moment where the judges interpreted that even the private unaided educational institutions also have to give EWS quota to the applicants. So this was the judgment that was given by these 5 judges with respect to these questions, and we understood as to how the judges tried to answer these questions and how this particular reasonings and the logic came to be. So now it remains to be seen what happens with the EWS quota. Does it start a dangerous trend of granting more and more reservations on different grounds? Having written this judgment, the judges also cautioned the parliament that the act of granting reservations to different communities needs to stop, and this is a very dangerous trend. But it remains to be seen what happens after this move. So this was a discussion with respect to this article, and with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, "The Black Sea Grain Initiative." Now this particular article appears in the newspaper because Russia recently has rejoined the Black Sea Grain Initiative. So from the examination point of view, we'll understand what is this Black Sea Grain Initiative. So we all know that ongoing invasion has been carried out by Russia on Ukraine, and the ramifications of that we have been continuously analyzing on different countries apart from Russia and Ukraine. So one important ramification is that of the food security crisis, where those kind of food grains which Ukraine was supplying to European regions, African regions, it took a hit as soon as Russia started invading Ukraine. So in order to, and when this started, these kind of nations did not get the adequate food supply, and it was felt that amidst the ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine, at least the supply of food grains should not be disturbed. And that is why countries such as Turkey and international organizations such as UN came together and brokered a deal between Russia and Ukraine, wherein it asked Russia to at least ease certain ports and allow Ukraine to transport its food grains. So this was the background of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, and this is where the Black Sea Grain Initiative was signed between Russia, Ukraine, UN and the Turkey. So it was an initiative that eased Russia's naval blockade and saw the reopening of 3 key Ukrainian ports. So what are these ports? We'll also have a look at them. This agreement is to create the sea corridor, which was negotiated by representatives from Ukraine, Russia, UN and Turkey, which happened in July this year. This agreement created procedures to safely export grain from certain ports to attempt to address the 2022 food crisis. And it provides, so what does this agreement actually have as its main clause? It provides a safe maritime humanitarian corridor for Ukrainian exports, particularly for food grains, from 3 of its key ports, namely Chornomorsk, Odessa and Pivdeny in the Black Sea. Let's look at the location of these 3 ports. So this is the region of Black Sea, and in the southern part of Ukraine, there is the port of Odessa, and other two ports which are situated in this region, and it is from these 3 ports that there would be a safe humanitarian transport of the food grains from Ukraine to other countries. So this was a significant thing that happened, and it is seen that Ukraine essentially is a major supplier in the world of food grains such as corn, wheat, sunflower. So even India faced an issue with this, where the imports of sunflower oil in India saw a dip when Russia started invading Ukraine. The other crops which they supply is barley, rapeseed, soya beans and other products. So these were the major products which Ukraine started to export. And what were the countries it exported this to? 27% of these food grains went to lower and lower middle countries such as Egypt, Iran and India, Bangladesh, Kenya, Sudan, Djibouti, Lebanon, Somalia, and 26% of it went to the higher income countries such as Bulgaria, China, Turkey, and 47% to other high income countries such as Spain, Italy, Netherlands and Germany. So this was the distribution of what kind of grains went to which countries. So now let's take a look at what is the outcome of this deal. Did this deal make any progress? It actually did, and in the past months, 10.1 million tons of grains have been shipped so far since the deal was brokered. And those people who were taking advantage of this situation and were hoarding grains in order to sell the grain in profit at a later time, they were forced to sell the grain in this particular period. And it has also been credited for having made a huge difference to the global cost of living crisis. So it eased the global food crisis to a great extent. Therefore, suspending the deal by Russia, had it suspended, the Russia has not suspended, it would say that it would either suspend but not end the deal, and currently it has rejoined the deal. So suspending the deal would obviously have a great impact on the food security issue of, at a global level. So this is the information important with respect to the Black Sea Grain Initiative. In this aspect, let's also understand a few important points about the Black Sea, because it becomes important for us from the examination perspective, especially from the mapping perspective. So whenever we talk of Black Sea, we should know the location, we should know those countries which are surrounding the Black Sea. So what are those countries surrounding Black Sea? We have Russia, Georgia, Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, Moldova and Ukraine. These are the countries which surround Russia, surround the Black Sea, and we should also know what are the important rivers that drain in the Black Sea. Since this region has been in quite in news for the past few months, this region becomes important, and therefore UPSC always focuses on major international rivers. So in this aspect, we should know which are those rivers from the European and Russian region which have a drain in the Black Sea. So this was our important information with respect to this particular article, and with this, let's move on to our next article for the day. The next article which appears in the newspaper reads, Census NPR sites declared as protected system. Now this is an important article which appears in the newspaper because it talks about a very new and important concept which is known as critical information infrastructure. Now what is this critical information infrastructure, we'll see, but let's first understand two sets of news. Before this article appeared, recently a few months ago, the Union Ministry of Electronics and IT declared the IT resources of ICICI Bank, HDFC Bank and UPI managing entity NPCI as critical information infrastructure, or it is also known as protected system. So it started naming those important databases, and now it has also named the database of Census and NPR as critical information infrastructure. So what do we mean by critical information infrastructure, and what is the significance of naming them under such category, and what protection is accorded to them? We'll take a look at all of this, and this topic becomes important for us from the prelims point of view and also mains point of view from the GS3 perspective. So let's understand what is critical information infrastructure. So this critical information infrastructure is actually defined under the Information Technology Act of 2000, which says that critical information infrastructure is a computer resource, the incapacitation or destruction of which shall have debilitating impact on national security, economy, public health or safety. So critical information infrastructure is anything that is in a form of a database or is in a form of a computer resource. So it essentially means that this is a digital resource. Anything that is a computer resource and the deprivation of this computer resource or the incapacitation or destruction of it will lead to a gross impact on national security, economy and public health would be termed as a critical information infrastructure. So who has the power to notify databases as the critical information infrastructure? It is the Union Ministry of Electronics and IT. So the government under this act has the power to declare any database, IT network or communications infrastructure as the CII to protect that digital asset. And any person who secures access or attempts to secure access to a protected system in violation of the law can be punished with a jail term up to 10 years. Any person tampering with this critical information infrastructure has a jail term of 10 years waiting for him or her. So what is this body which deals with the critical information infrastructure? So a body known as National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, NCIIPC, was an agency created in January 2014, which is the nodal agency for taking all measures to protect the nation's critical information infrastructure. Now, why does this protection become important? Now, it is seen that increasingly cyber attacks, specifically which are known as denial of service attacks, those kind of attacks wherein the computer resources are hijacked and the user is not able to access the computer resource, and either they have to pay the ransom or they completely are denied of the service. These kind of attacks are known as denial of service attacks. These kind of attacks are becoming very common, which are also state sponsored by some countries, wherein the important computer resources or power grids or other critical infrastructures are impacted and the services are denied, and therefore these can have great ramifications. So it's a need to protect these infrastructure, and that is why there was a need felt to enlist certain databases as critical information infrastructure to protect them. So the National Critical Infrastructure Information Protection Center actually is the agency which takes all the measures. It is mandated to guard these CIIs from unauthorized access, modification, use, disclosure, disruption, incapacitation or destruction. It will monitor and forecast national level threats for policy guidance and expertise, sharing situational awareness for early warning or alerts. And in case of threat, this critical information infrastructure, the NCPIC may call for information and give directions to the critical sectors or persons serving or having a critical impact on this particular CII. So this was our discussion with respect to this article. We come to the end of today's discussion and we'll meet again tomorrow with the important articles from the newspaper. Thank you.